Michener Awards is the best in public service journalism in Canada, and this year we had 21 entries from 18 different media outlets. The outlets range from the big media people such as the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail and CTV News, all the way to smaller newspapers like the Windsor Star and even weekly newspapers such as the St. Hyacinth newspaper. And really what we're looking for when we get these incredible, absolutely amazing pieces of journalism is we're looking for journalism that makes an impact on the public good, that where there's achieved results, identifiable results in areas such as public policy, ethical standards, corporate governance, and just stories that make a difference in the lives of Canadians. And I think we can think of, when we look back at the entries this year, Kevin, we can think about a lot of, the finalists certainly have achieved that.
Absolutely, in all those areas. But one of the ones that stands out for me was the Windsor Star. And this was a series of stories that really had an impact on people's lives. It's the community down across from Detroit, everyone knows. Cancer Care Ontario was trying to consolidate cancer treatment areas and surgery areas across the province. They were going to close thoracic surgery, throat surgery, in the city of Windsor. The medical community first raised the alarm about this and resisted the cancellation. Cancer Care Ontario turned around and actually threatened to stop funding all cancer surgeries in Windsor, move it all to London, Ontario, and that's a 2-hour drive away. The medical community were the first to resist it, but the Windsor Star really picked up the mantle and they galvanized the community. And it's always a fine line. Advocacy journalism is always a fine line, but I think it was entirely justified here, where you've got the daily newspaper in the community really getting behind an issue that was going to affect people's lives.
And making some real results too, some tangible results because of that coverage.
Well, exactly, and we're always looking for that. We're always looking for concrete changes to public policy, as you say, or a real impact on people's lives. And here I think both, because the Ontario government and Cancer Care Ontario did reverse their decision. And that was an enormous benefit for all the people living in the Windsor area.
That's right. Well, that builds nicely into the Canadian Presses series, and basically they shone the light on the veterans who have come home from Afghanistan, the fact that they were being forgotten by defense as well as by the government, that promises had been made in areas such as mental health, benefits, pensions, and even survivors' benefits that weren't being followed through. And they persistently followed that story to the point where, in fact, there were changes made and that the veterans are getting the chance to get the benefits and the services that they so richly deserve for serving our country.
Absolutely, and a real impact on their lives and the lives of the family of veterans. And also an accountability element there. I think CP, with their persistence, really held the federal government accountable. And again, some very demonstrable changes were made, more funding for the last post fund to help with the burial of veterans, as well as you say, mental health, improving the resources available in the area of mental health.
That's right. Yeah. What are some other things that stand out for you, do you think?
The other stories, the CTV did a marvelous job with the Senate, the so-called Senate scandal, where we had a number of senators whose expense requests were quite questionable. And what we saw there again was the quality of journalism there. The CTV and their reporter Robert Fife, the award is for the news agency, but Robert Fife led the way on many of the stories, really using his contacts and his knowledge of the Ottawa scene to really get behind the scenes and dig out details and lead the story. And again, so it's a matter of, I thought, accountability, really holding the Red Chamber and the government to account for some practices that seem to be fairly widespread and egregious in a couple of instances.
That's right, and again, this whole idea of forcing them to manage the taxpayers' dollars in a responsible, accountable, and transparent way, right. Which is, again, goes to our mandate, speaks to our mandate. And if we're thinking about righting wrongs, you think about the Edmonton Journal and Calgary Herald story, their Fatal Care series that showed the shocking number of children that died while they were in foster care in Alberta over 14 years. And that story really helped to change public policy with regard to things like getting death records opened up, the whole thing about covering publication bans. There were parents whose children were in foster care, the children died, and they could not speak out. They could not speak out because of publication bans, because of antiquated rules. And that was quite an in-depth, persistent, changing story that changed lives for many children.
And the storytelling there was just, it was heartbreaking. They not only did they have the facts, and after 4 years of Freedom of Information requests, did they get some of the numbers and start actually connecting the dots for the government, which hadn't connected the dots themselves. But the stories of individual families, parents who had given up their children early on, only to find out that their children had died in foster care, and then through provincial law were not allowed to even comment on the fact that their children had died.
Yeah, it was shocking, and it's wonderful to see a wrong being righted because of journalism, good journalism, persistent journalism.
That makes me think of Lac Mégantic as well, the Globe and Mail's excellent coverage. There was a lot of coverage of Lac Mégantic. Obviously, it was a huge event, not just in Quebec, but across the country, because so many rail cars travel through so many communities carrying dangerous goods, and in this case, very flammable oil. But the Globe and Mail went so deep with that story, and their intent really was the public good, because they were looking at what regulations weren't either in place or weren't being followed.
That's right. How could something like this happen in Canada? Why would it happen? Those are basic questions that we ask, and they just went deep, and they found databases. And again, there's changes happening in this. Crude oil had not been even designated as a hazardous good. It was quite shocking, and again, the public policy changes that came out of that, again, is heartening.
And almost immediate, the federal government, to their credit, did react to the Globe and Mail. The Globe and Mail literally led the journalism community on those stories, but they also led the federal government. And to the federal government's credit, I think, the minister did acknowledge that the Globe and Mail had really opened their eyes to some serious gaps in not just the regulations, but the enforcement of those regulations.
Yes, and again, that's perfect exemplary journalism that we like to see, and that we do see, that really warms my heart when I think about that there is this kind of journalism happening, and it's happening even despite the challenges in the industry these days.
I find it really affirming as a former journalist who now works sort of on the other side of the fence, and I deal with a lot of reporters in my day-to-day working life. But to see the quality, and in these challenging times where there isn't a lot of money, and journalists are spread very thin now, and newsrooms are thin, but to see so many high-quality entries coming in is really, it really affirms faith in the industry.
And in these times of cutbacks, you're finding that journalists doing our jobs, that we're facing incredible attacks on what we're doing, what we're trying to do. And I think that came out very clearly in the Toronto Star story and its coverage of Rob Ford, the mayor.
Exactly. There are so many elements to this story that make it newsworthy, not just for journalists. I mean, I think a lot of journalists enjoy talking about the journalism behind the journalism. But there's a very good public good here. The Toronto Star were persistent in scrutinizing the activities of the mayor, and really explored that question of, does a politician's private life impact their public life? And it's a question you can discuss until the cows come home. But in this case, I think there's no question that with this mayor, his private behavior absolutely influenced his public behavior and his obligations to the office.
And the Toronto Star really went up against great odds to continue publishing, to continue releasing new details, new information, despite very, very serious threats, very serious attacks, outcry from people saying it's none of their business. But in the end, the RCMP investigation showed, in fact, that the allegations the Star had brought forward were in fact true, and that people who are governed by the mayor, the largest city in Canada, needed to know this in order to assess the information that they're given.
And it raised all sorts of interesting questions, and I think among Americans as well, because this story has played so big in the United States, about what do you do with a mayor who misbehaves on that scale? I think a lot of Americans were shocked that you can't just boot somebody like that out of office or have a recall vote. But tangible results here. It's quite clear that the Star's reporting contributed significantly to the mayor's colleagues on council, stripping him of his real power and leaving him really with just the chain of office and some ceremonial powers.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
So any closing thoughts about, our judging, about the entries, about the awards?
Yeah. It always strikes me when we look at whether we get 24 or 40 entries, that the quality is always very high. There's some excellent investigative journalism that goes on, but I think as we sit around the table and we look at the criteria for the Michener Award, we always come back to what was that tangible impact on the public good. And again, we came up with 6 excellent finalists. Again, always a tough decision, but there really was that combination of investigative journalism, high quality journalism,
yeah.
and then an impact on the public good.
That's exactly, and certainly one of the things that always it makes me as a small, I come from Halifax, I'm not in the center in Toronto or Ottawa or Montreal, is that smaller newspapers are also making a huge contribution when it comes to public service journalism. And in the past, last year we had the Coast magazine, a free entertainment weekly that was nominated, one of the finalists. We've had the Eastern Door from Kananakwe, right. And so those so I would really hope to see more of that as the media, as media shifts, that we in fact find the grassroots, smaller publications contributing more to the discussion when it comes to public service journalism.
That's right. When you look at the history of the Michener Award, quite a number of winners have come from the medium to smaller sized media outlets.
Yeah.
And it's always a question of resources. You do need to free up reporters and editors to really go after a story. But at the end of the day, it's really about the ability to recognize a story that has a tangible connection to the public good, and then throwing whatever resources you do have at it.
That's right, and it makes a difference. Thanks very much.
Thank you.